Chapter 6. Portkey. Harry felt as though he had barely lain down to sleep in Ron's room when he was being shaken awake by Mrs. Weasley. Time to go, Harry dear, she whispered, moving away to wake Ron. Harry felt around for his glasses, put them on, and sat up. It was still dark outside, Ron muttered indistinctly as his mother roused him. At the foot of Harry's mattress, he saw two large, disheveled shapes emerging from tangle of blankets. "Time already?" said Fredge groggily. They dressed in silence, too sleepy to talk. Then, yawning and stretching, the four of them headed downstairs into the kitchen. Mrs. Weasley had stirring the content of a large pot on the stove, while Mr. Weasley was sitting at the table, taking a shape of large parchment cakes. He looked up as the boys entered and spread his arm so that they could see his clothes more clearly, and was wearing what appeared to be a galling sweater and a very old pair of jeans, slightly too big for him and held up with a thick leather belt. "What do you think?" he asked anxiously. "We are supposed to go incognito. Do I look like a muggle, Harry?" "Yes," said Harry, smiling. "Very good. Where is the Bill and Charlie?" "And Percy," said George, falling to stifle a huge yawn. "Well, they are appearing, aren't they?" said Mrs. Weasley, giving the large pot over to the table and starting to ladle porridge into bowls, so they can have a bit of lie-in. Harry knew that appearing meant disappearing from one place to reappearing almost instantly in another. But I've never known any Hogwarts student to do it, and understood that it was very difficult. "So they are still in bed," said Fred grumpily, pulling his bowl of porridge toward him. "Why can't we appear too?" "Because you're not of age and you haven't passed your test," Mrs. Weasley. "And where have those girls got to?" She bustled out of the kitchen and they heard her climbing the stairs. "You have to pass the test to appreciate," Harry asked. "Oh, yes," said Mr. Weasley, tucking the ticket safely into the back pocket of the jeans. The Department of Magical Transformation had to be a couple of years the person people of other days for operating without a license. It's not easy operation, and when it's not done properly, it can lead to nasty complication. This pair I'm talking about went and splitted themselves. Everyone around the table except Harry wins. Splitted, said Harry. They left half of themselves behind, and Mr. Weasley, now spooning large amount of treacle onto his porridge. So, of course, they were stuck, couldn't move either way, had to wait for the accidental magic reversal. Squad to sort them out, mint a fair old bit of paperwork. I can tell you what with the muggles who spotted the body parts they had left behind. Harry had a sudden vision of a pair of legs and an eyeball lying abandoned on the pavement of private drive. "Were they okay?" he asked, startled. "Oh yes," said Mr. Weasley, matter-of-factly, "but they got a heavy knee and I don't think they'll be trying to eat it in a hurry. You don't mess around with apparition. There are plenty of adult wizards who don't bother with it. Prefer brooms, slower but safer. But Bill and Charlie and Percy can all do it." "Charlie had to take the rest twice," said Fred, grinning. "He failed the first time, apparent a mile south of where the meant to. Right on the top of some poor old dear doing her shopping, remember?" "Yes. Well, we passed the second time," said Mrs. Weasley, matching back into the kitchen, and her tea sniggered. "Percy only passed 2 weeks ago," said George. "He's been apparating downstairs every morning since, just to prove he can." There were footsteps down the passageway, and Hermione and Ginny came into the kitchen. both looking pale and drowsy. Why do we have to be up so early? Ginny said, rubbing her eyes and sitting down at her table. We have got a bit of walk, said Mr. Weasley. Walk? Said Harry. What are we walking to the World Cup? No, 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 that's mile away, said Mr. Weasley, smiling. We only need to talk a short way. It's just that it's very difficult for a large number of wizards to congregate without attracting Muggles' attention. We have to be very careful about how we travel at this of time. And on a huge occasion like Virtual Cup, George said Mrs. Weasley sharply, and they all jumped. That said George in an innocent tone that deceived nobody. What is that in your pocket? Nothing. Don't you lie to me. Mrs. Weasley pointed her wand at George's pocket and said, as you. Several small, brightly colored objects zoomed out of George's pocket. He made a grab for them but missed, and they sped right into Mrs. Weasley's outstretched hand. We told you to destroy them, said Mrs. Weasley furiously, holding up what were unmistakable more tongue toffee. We told you to get rid of the lot. Empty your pocket, go on, both of you. It was an unpleasant scene. The twins had evidently been trying to smuggle as many toffees out of the house as possible, and it was only by using her summoning charm that Mrs. Weasley managed to end them off. Asio, 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 she shouted, and toffee zoomed from all sorts of unlike places, including the lining of George's pocket and the turn-ups of Fred's jeans. We spent 6 months developing those, Fred shouted at his mother as threw the toffee away. Oh, made to spend 6 months, she shrieked. No wonder you didn't get more owls. All in all, the atmosphere was not very friendly as they took their departure. Mrs. Weasley was still glowing as she kissed Mr. Weasley on the cheek, though not nearly as much as the twins, who had each hoisted their rucksack onto their back and walked out without a word or to her. Well, have a lovely time, said Mrs. Weasley, and behave yourself, she called after the twins retreating back, but they did not look back or answer. I'll send Bill, Charlie, and Percy along around midday, Mrs. Weasley said to Mr. Weasley as he said Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Ginny set off across the dark yard after Fred and George. It was chilly and the moon was still out, only a dull, greenish tangy along the horizon to their right showed that daybreak was drawing closer. Harry, having been thinking about thousands of wizards speeding toward the Quidditch World Cup, sped up to walk with Mr. Weasley. So, how does everyone get there without all Muggle noticing? He asked. It's been a massive organizational problem, sighed Mr. Weasley. The trouble is about 100,000 wizards turned up at the World Cup. And of course, we just haven't got a magical site big enough to accommodate them all. There are places Muggle can't penetrate, but imagine trying to pick 100,000 wizards into Diagon Alley or platform 9 and 3/4. So we had to and a nice deserted moor and set up as many anti-Muggle precautions as possible. The whole ministry been working on it for months. First of course, we have to stagger the arrival. People with cheaper tickets have to arrive 2 weeks beforehand. A limited number use Muggle transport, but we can't have too many clogging up their buses and trains. Remember, wizards are coming from all over the world. Some apparate, of course, but we have to set up safe points for them to appear. Well away from the Muggles, I believe there is many wood they are using as the apparition point. For those who don't want to apparate or can't, we use Portkey. They are objects that are used to transport wizards from one place to another at a prearranged time. You can do large group at a time if you need to. There have been 200 Portkey placed at a strategic point around Britain, and the nearest one to us is up at the top of Stotshead Hill, so that's where we are heading. Mr. Weasley pointed ahead of them, where a large black mass rose beyond the village of Otis and Catchpole. What sort of object are portkeys? Said Harry curiously. Well, they can be anything, said Mr. Weasley. Unrestricted things, obviously, so don't go picking them up and playing with them. Stuff they'll just think is little. They trod down the dark blank lane toward the village. The silence broke only by their footsteps. The sky lightened very slow as they made their way through the village, its inky blackness diluting to desperate blue. Harry's hand had feet were freezing. Mr. Weasley kept checking his watch. They didn't have breath to spare for talking as they began to climb short-haired hills, stumbling occasionally in hidden rabbit holes, slipping on thick black tuft of grass. Each breath Harry took was sharp in his chest, and his legs were starting to seize up with at fast his feet found level above. "Whew!" panted Mr. Weasley, taking off his glass and wiping them on his sweater. "Well, we have made good time. We have got 10 minutes." Hermione came over the crest of the hill last, clutching a snitch in her side. "Now we just need the portkey," said Mr. Weasley, replacing his glasses and squinting around at the ground. "It won't be big. Come on." They spread out, searching. They had only been at it for a couple of minutes. However, when a shot rent the still ear. "Oh, here, Arthur! Oh, here, son, we have got it!" Two tall girls were shouted against the starry sky on the other side of the hilltop. "Amos," said Mr. Weasley, smiling as he strode over to the man who had shouted. The rest of them followed. Mr. Weasley was shaking hands with a dirty-faced wizard with a scrubby brown beard, who was holding a muddy-looking old boot in his other hand. "This is Amos Diggory, everyone," said Mr. Weasley. "He worked for the Department of the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. And I think you know his son, Cedric." Cedric Diggory was an extremely handsome boy of around 17. He was captain and seeker of the Hufflepuff House Quidditch team at Hogwarts. "Hi," said Cedric, looking around at them all. Everybody said hi back except Fred and George, who merely nodded. They had never quite forgiven Cedric for beating their team, Gryffindor, in the first Quidditch match of the previous year. "Long walk, Arthur?" Cedric's father asked. "Not too bad," said Mr. Weasley. "Will you just on the other side of the village there you had to get up at 2, didn't we?" said. "I tell you, I'll go glad when he's got his apparition test. Still not complaining Quidditch World Cup. Wouldn't miss it for sackful of gallons, and the tickets cost about that. Mind you, looks like I got off easy." Amos Diggory paid goods naturally around at the three Weasley boys, Harry, Hermione, and Ginny. "All these years, Arthur?" "Oh no, only the redheads," said Mr. Weasley, pointing out his children. "This is Hermione, friend of Ron's, and Harry, another friend." "Merlin's beard," said Amos Diggory, his eyes widening. Harry Potter." "Yeah," said Harry. Harry was used to people looking curiously at him when they met him, used to the way their eyes moved at once, to the lightning scar on his forehead, but it always made him feel uncomfortable. "Seth's talked about you, of course," said Amos Diggory. "Told us all about playing against you last year. I said to him, said that all be something to tell your grandchild. That will you beat Harry Potter." Harry couldn't think of any reply to this, so he remained silent. Fred and George were both scrolling again. Cedric looked slightly embarrassed. Harry fell off his broom. Dad, he muttered, I told you it was an accident. Yes, but you didn't fall off, did you? Roared Amos genially, slapping his son on his back. Always modest, said always the gentleman. But the best man won. I'm sure Harry had said the same. Wouldn't you? Yeah. One fell off his broom, one stay on. You don't need to be genuine to tell which one is better flyer. Must be nearly time, said Mr. Weasley quickly, pulling out his watch again. Do you know whether we are waiting for any more armors? No, the love would have been there for a week already and the Fairy couldn't get ticket, said Mr. Diggory. There aren't any more of us in the area here. Not that I know of, said Mr. Weasley. Yes, it's a minute off. We had better get ready. He looked around at Harry and Hermione. You just need to touch the pottery, that's all. A nigger will do. With difficulty owning their bulky backpacks, the 9 of them crowded around the old wood they held out by Amos' degree. They all stood there in a tight circle as the chill breeze swept over the hilltop. Nobody spoke. It suddenly occurred to Harry how odd this would look if the Muggle were to walk up here now. 9 people, 2 of them grown men, clutching the manky old boot in the semi-darkness, waiting. 3, muttered Mr. Weasley, one eye still on his watch. 2, 1. It happened immediately. Harry felt as though a hook just behind his navel had been suddenly jerked irresistibly forward. His feet left the ground. He couldn't feel Ron and Hermione on either side of him, their shoulder bagging into his. They were all speeding forward in a howl of wind and swirling color. His foot Naga was stuck to the boot as though it was pulling him magnetically towards, and then